Okay, thank you very much for watching this episode. Today, I'm speaking with my colleague Dominic Yeo, Associate Professor at Hong Kong Baptist University and lead author of the paper, How Persuasive Is Personalized Advertising, a Meta-Analytic Review of Experimental Evidence. This paper is co-authored with Dr. Tsz Hang Chu and Dr. Qiqi Li, which just won the runner-up prize for the best paper published in the Journal of Advertising Research for 2025. Well, huge congratulations on the award, Dominic.
Thank you so much, Vincent. Yeah, and we're really honored about the recognition. Yes.
Yeah, it's really well deserved because your paper tackles a question that not only puzzles me, but I believe also puzzles lots of researchers and practitioners. That is about how effective that it is for the persuasive advertisement. You know, nowadays we have digital footprints everywhere, and the advertisement nowadays are no longer generic. They are tailored specifically to who we are and what we do. But you know, as these advertisements get smarter, a critical debate has emerged. Does this personalization actually work, or does it just make consumers feel uncomfortable, or maybe a little bit trapped as well? So to kick this off, for listeners who haven't had a chance to read the full paper yet, in a few minutes, could you briefly tell us about your article and its main findings?
Yeah, absolutely. No, so as you said, everyone is using personalized advertising these days. So the idea is that you use some consumer data, anything from your name to your browsing history, to tailor ads and make them more relevant. But if you look at the research, the findings are all over the place, right? So some studies says that it works wonders, others says that it creeps people out and may even backfire. So this is what scholars call the personalization paradox. So we wanted to get a clearer, bigger picture answer. So we conducted a meta-analysis, which is kind of like a study of studies, right? So we gathered all the experimental research we can find. There are about 53 in total, with almost 12,000 participants that directly compared personalized ads to generic non-personalized ads. And actually the results are pretty clear. So overall, personalized advertising is more persuasive. On average, it leads to more positive attitudes towards the ad and the brand. It also increases people's intention to do things like click, share, or buy. But the most interesting part is why it works. So we look at two potential explanations. First is perceived relevance. It's a feeling that, this ad gets me. And perceived intrusiveness, that creepy feeling that, you're being watched. So analysis shows that the magic ingredient or the secret sauce is actually relevance, right? So personalization makes the ad feel more relevant to you, and it's actually what drives these positive effects. Interestingly, we find that if you do it correctly, personalization didn't just won't increase feelings of intrusiveness. So the benefits of relevance seems to outweigh the potential cost of intrusiveness.
Right. So, well, that's a fascinating finding. So I could say the main takeaway is it works, right? So it works because it makes the message feel personal and relevant, not because it's avoiding being creepy. So, but because that the creepiness factor isn't as big as a big deal as we might think.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Yeah.
mhm.
So consumers seems to more likely to appreciate the relevance than to be put off by the intrusiveness. So which makes it a very low risk strategy for advertisers.
Right. So that leads me to my next question. Our audience is full of, brand messengers, agency strategies, and media buyers, all those actors, that play a part in shaping the advertisement that we see nowadays. So how can our findings be used to, be used by those working in advertising? What are these, practical implications and on-the-ground implications that you could say based on the meta-analytic review that you have based on the papers?
Right. So I think there are a few key takeaways for these practitioners. So first, and actually most simply, just keep keep investing in personalization, but do it smartly, right? So our data says it's effective, but it genuinely moves the needle on consumer attitudes and intentions. But you need to focus on enhancing relevance. This is the core mechanism. Your goal shouldn't be just, to insert a name or location to an ad. your goal should be make a consumer feel understood. This is where theories like self-referencing comes in. It's the idea that people pay more attention and feel more positive about things that relates to them. So when you design a campaign, the key question should be, how does this personalization make the message more personally meaningful for the consumers? So our findings actually provide a hint about the type of personalization that actually works best. So we find that covert personalization is what we call online behavior advertising, where ads are tailored based on your browsing history or search queries, was particularly effective. It's likely because it creates a strong sense of relevance that actually matches your actual interests. But on the other hand, so-called overt personalization, such as using someone's name, didn't show a significant effect in our analysis. This might be because it may feel a bit superficial or even gimmicky if it's not done well. So my advice to practitioners is to be more genuine in your personalization that is actually based on consumers' actual interests and needs. So make the ad feel like a helpful recommendation and not just like a cold call that just happens to know your name.
Yeah, so I think it's especially relevant nowadays when AI plays a part in the making of advertisement nowadays, right? So that's incredibly useful advice. So moving from moving from the what to how, right? It's not only about personalization, but about the authenticity that plays a very important part in the making of advertisement nowadays. So now let's go back to the beginning of this project, right? So because every project, as we know, as researcher, we always start with a spark of curiosity or maybe our observation of our everyday life. So where did you and your co-authors get the idea for this article and this topic, and especially this very massive data processing for a meta-analytic project?
Right. So like most people, we use social media, maybe, for the older people like us, we use Facebook, right? And then, so one day, I was just talking to someone about, certain brand or certain product. And then almost immediately, I see my Facebook, feeds, filled with all such ads. It's not that I click on something, I was very sure not to click on anything. But the ads also was like, is Facebook actually watching and listening? But of course, as a researcher, I was not just beyond being creeped out. I was thinking, does this actually even work, right? So I'm really curious about this personalization paradox, right? So on one hand, we know that people are pouring in billions, advertisers are pouring billions of dollars into this, and the technology, as you said, AI now is incredibly sophisticated. So on the other hand, you hear so many people, including myself, complaining about these creepy ads and privacy. So we see this tension everywhere, right? On the news, in our own social circles, and even in the academic literature, which was full of conflicting results. So we wanted to step back and look, okay, can we have a more definitive answer? And meta-analysis was a perfect tool for that because it allows you to synthesize all the existing evidence and see what the overall trend is. We are curious if after we account for all these differences between studies, whether there will be a clear pattern. We wanted to know if the promise of personalization was living up to the hype and what was really driving its success or failure.
Right. So it reminds me of my experience of, seeing all those advertisements on my social media feeds. And I even have this doubt, how do they know, right? So they know my interest, or sometimes maybe not my interest, especially when they recommend those really luxurious brands and cars to me. I was like, how they guess, my interest. So it's great that, when your research question comes directly from the real world experience, I think that's the most exciting part because they're not only solving the puzzle from a research perspective, but also from our own life experience perspective, right? So it seems that you're trying to solve this puzzle that you're experiencing at the first hand. So moving to the methodological part of this paper, so the scale of this project, a meta-analysis, reviewing so many studies is never an easy job, right? It's never a straightforward one. So what challenges did you run into while you're working on this article, working with your co-authors and project teams?
Oh yeah, definitely. So the biggest challenge was actually conceptual. It was actually quite difficult to conceptualize and operationalize personalization itself. So when we started, we thought, personalization was so straightforward. So it's just a simple concept. But as we dig into the literature, we realized that everyone was defining it and measuring it differently. Sometimes they even use a lot of different names, right? So some studies define it as using someone's name in an email. Others use location. And, more recent studies, they don't even use the word personalization, but they look at online behavioral advertising, which is based on your online activities. So, and, some people call it customization, some people call it tailoring, and even the methodologically, and how they operationalized it, their studies. Some studies would use a scenario-based approach where it asks you to imagine your ad was personalized for you. So this created a huge problem for us as meta-analysts. Because how do you compare these different types of personalization? So in meta-analysis, we call this, are we comparing apples and oranges, right? So is the ad with a name on it the same as the ad with a product that you just searched for? So we have to think very carefully and create, a coding scheme that categorizes different approaches. So for example, we have to distinguish between overt personalization, which is explicit, and covert personalization, which is based on behavior. We also had to separate studies that use actual personalization with real participant data from those that actually use imagined scenarios. This was a major challenge, but it also turned out to be one of the most important findings, that the type of personalization matters. So for example, when we find that you've used actual personalization, it was far more effective than imagined personalization. So it was a lot of work, but untangling that conceptual knot was crucial for making sense of the data.
Right. So I think what is methodological can always go back to conceptual or theoretical, right? So not only you provide a tool or provide some very useful reference about researchers who want to do meta-analytic review, so the process that we provide in the paper, but also provide a vocabulary of relevant research that can be, all categorized into this very, huge personalization category in advertisement research. I can only imagine the long database, the complex structure of the coding sheets that you have, because based on my experience, I always stopped at, the abstract search stage. It only highlights how complex that a simple advertising term can be. So you have done this massive review. You have clarified, the current state of knowledge in your paper, and you have won a major award for it. So what's next? So I think my, next question is about the future. So what ideas do you have for further research in this area? Is there any, sparkle of curiosity that you have based on, what you have done?
Right. So, well, the future is definitely very exciting. And in a word, it's AI, right? So everything is AI now. So our study provides actually a great baseline for where we are now. But the field is actually moving incredibly fast, primarily due to advancement in artificial intelligence. Right. So first, I think we need more research on generative AI in advertising. We're already seeing that AI can create personalized ad copies, images, or even videos on the fly for millions of users at the same time. Right. So how do people respond to this? Does the AI-generated personalized ad feel any different from a human-created one? Does it enhance relevance? Or does it actually make you feel even more uncanny and intrusive? We don't have these answers yet. And then second thing is there's this whole area of what we call algorithmic advertising. So our study looked at personalization based on your past behavior, what you have already done or things that you looked at, right? But AI algorithms now are predictive. So they're not just showing you ads for things that you've looked at. They're showing you ads that they think you want in the future, right? So this is a whole new level of personalization. And we need to understand its persuasive effects and its ethical implications. And also finally, I think there's a lot of work to be done on the user side. So as people become more aware of AI being used to target them, what we call persuasion knowledge, how will that actually change their reactions? Will they become more skeptical and resistant? Or will they come to expect and even demand this level of hyper-personalization? So I think our future research agenda in this area is really focused on the intersection between AI, personalization, and really just the consumer's psychology. So the game is changing and we as researchers really need to keep up.
Right. So I think that's a really, there'll be a lot of work to be done, right? So based on the work that you provided in this paper, then the scholars can really look at the evolving landscape of how generative AI and predictive AI is changing and reshaping or making the future of advertisement or interactive advertisement. So that must be a really fruitful frontier to look at. So it looks like that we have to have you on your back, right? As your to basically looking forward to what you can do to tell us, right? So what advertisement can be in the future. So thank you so much for taking the time to speaking with us today, Dominic. There has been a really credible insightful conversation, I would say, that we have between you and me. And congratulations again on you and Dr. Chu and Dr. Li on this award-winning paper.
All right, thank you, Vincent. It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.